Marhaba and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll take an in-depth look at the 1979 film Quintet. Now the reason I watched this film is because of its premise. It's a sci-fi mystery film, and the other reason is that it stars Paul Newman. I've been watching and catching up on a lot of Newman's films. I think he's a really talented actor, but I do believe that his prime was during the 1960s. My favorite films so far are Hombre and another one called Harper. But he does have a couple of good films during the 60s, and so that's why I really liked his acting. Unfortunately, in Quintet, the actors, the remainder of the cast, are relatively unknown to me. I didn't recognize any of the actors in the film, and I don't believe they are one of the most famous. So it was a solo film for Paul Newman. The premise of the film is quite interesting. It immediately starts, according to the IMDb, with the plot line as in the distant future of an ice age world. And immediately this premise grasps anyone who likes films. And if you look back in the movie history, we notice that the most successful films, or those films that involve post-apocalyptic worlds, those that involve different realities, future realities, tend to be successful. And I've always wondered, why is that? Why are those films that involve different realities, distant futures, are successful? And I think it goes back to something we called in psychology fantasy and escapism. So a lot of us as humans like to resolve to escapism, to escape our realities. See, most of our lives tend to become redundant and repetitive. And so that's why the movie business, the TV business is quite successful, because it takes the individual and transforms him into a different reality. So you live with these characters, you live in that environment. And so these movies that involve a complete different realities or futuristic realities are more attractive, because they are different realities from our own. It's a different world. For example, let's take, for example, the Star Wars franchise. It's one of the most successful films. And I think part of it, I mean, there are many reasons why it's successful. I mean, the direction, the characters, the music, all that. But part of it is the escapism part, because we tend to escape from our reality into a different, distant future where there's laser beams, where there are talking robots, and all that. Another film that was quite successful and quite similar in success to Star Wars is the Matrix trilogy. Because again, in the Matrix, there's a different world. There's a world that has changed from what is currently known or what we're living in right now. And funny enough, at the moment, we're sort of living in a different reality. What I'm trying to say is that if we look back 2 years ago, our lives has changed because of obviously the COVID-19 pandemic. We can't go out as we used to. Theme parks has been shut down. Movie theaters have been shut down. Limited interaction with people. It's changed. But thankfully, I mean, the pandemic has affected people differently. But generally speaking, I don't think it's a major change from our previous lives. I mean, we still thankfully have houses, some of us still have jobs, and the most importantly, we have plenty of food and a place to sleep. So again, going back, I mean, I know I'm branching out here. Escapism. Now, escapism can be positive, of course, because when you take a break from your redundant life, after you're done with that break, you'll come back active and fresh and going back to work and trying to enjoy your life. However, of course, having excessive escapism, like those who are addict to Netflix or addict even to video games, This can be negative, of course, because otherwise, because of this excessive escapism, you want go to work, you want study, and so on. And the same goes for drugs or alcohol. They are a mean of escapism as well. People drink to forget, to escape their realities, or take drugs for the same purpose. And this, of course, is negative because we all know that drugs can cause brain damage and they can cause addiction with all its negative consequences. So back to our movie, Quintet. As I mentioned, the premise is quite interesting. And once the movie opens, we are immediately transferred into this futuristic ice age world where food is scarce, people are barely living, electricity is very limited, and immediately we feel like, wow, this is quite an intriguing and environment, a different, unrealistic world. Let's see what happens. And then, funnily enough, in the film itself, people who are living in this harsh ice age world have their own way of escapism. Apparently, in the film, there's this board game that's called Quintet. So almost everyone in the movie, all the characters, play this game as a mean of escapism because there's nothing else to do. There are limited jobs, I mentioned, limited activities because of obviously of the extreme cold. So people live in houses and then they play this game that's called Quintet, a board game. Now, Paul Newman's character, his name is Essex, has just moved from a north area to this south city. And then he discovers that people are being too involved in this game. And then he discovered that there's a mystery, that people who are playing the game suddenly start to get murdered or killed. So what's the mystery behind that? And again, I think what's happening here, what I like about this film is that the director or the writer are talking about ahead of their time. The movie is really ahead of its time. It's quite smart in terms that people are so involved into this game that they start to take it seriously and then started to kill themselves. And that's when Essex, the character played by Newman, tries to figure out what's happening, why are people killing themselves, and the reason he's motivated to figure it out is because a friend of his, a very close friend, gets murdered upon his arrival to this city. So the premise, the synopsis is quite smart. It's different. It involves escapism. It involves different reality. And as I mentioned, these type of films usually are successful. Unfortunately, Quintet seems to have failed. I believe it flopped back in the 1979. And the reason is, although it has Paul Newman, the reason is, first, it's ahead of its time, and second, the execution of the idea wasn't perfect. I mean, yes, the movie starts, as I mentioned, attracting and grasping the audience attention at the beginning because we are introduced to this new world, to this new environment, but then it becomes a bit redundant. Like after the 45-minute mark of the film, by the way, the film is around 2 hours long. So by the 45 minutes mark, I started to feel a bit bored. My level of interest drops because it slows down markedly. And then after we got introduced to this world, nothing new is introduced. It becomes redundant. It becomes repetitive. Okay, we saw the world. We saw the environment, the houses, and people living in extreme cold and the way they dress, with multiple layers of clothes so they keep themselves warm. The part where Essex tries to investigate the Quintet game, the people, the group behind it, the reason for the murders is a bit slow, and that's why. And this creates a lack of gripping effect to the audience, and that's why I think a lot of people lost interest. However, at the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I regained interest again in the film as I wanted to see how it is concluded. And it was quite a good conclusion. Another problem with the film is that throughout the film, the director, for some reason, used a filter that is the hollow filter. For example, we are seeing through a clear picture through a circle, but in the peripheries of the camera or the screen, it's blurred. It's like one of those filters we see in Instagram. Now, I understand that certain directors can use that for a very short period of time, for example, in scenes where characters are recalling something in the past, or if a character has just woken up from a coma, that makes sense. But having it throughout the film is a bit exhausting to me, and I want to see the whole picture of the film. Why do you limit my view of the film? I mean, I think he was trying to create a claustrophobic effect to transform people into more of a mystery and a thrill of the world. But I think it didn't work because we as audience, we like to see the whole picture. We don't like to be limited. He might have used other ways to make the film more claustrophobic or anxious provoking. Paul Newman's performance is good. He was quite decent, although he didn't really explore his level of emotions in the film. Yes, he becomes angry, he becomes sad, but throughout the film, it's mostly about anger and him trying to solve out the murder mysteries that's happening and surrounding the Quintet game. The game itself in the film, see, a film that involves a board game, I think should have been explored more, and the game should have been a center character of the film. And I think that's another problem and another fault in the film, because the game is really, although it's the main, I mean, the movie title is named after the game, the Quintet. So I thought the game should have been more highlighted and would have been more interesting. But again, it's a board game, so how can you make a board game interested, and how can you integrate it into a film? Imagine if there's a film about Monopoly or Risk. Would it be enjoyable? I don't know, maybe. So that's it. So again, to summarize, I believe the film had a great premise, a great idea, and it does dig deep and analyzes the depth of people and their fantasies and their escapism. I mean, we went into this film, again, we like to watch these type of films to escape our realities, and in the film itself, the characters are escaping their realities by playing the Quintet game. I like the idea. If you can tolerate 2 hours, actually, no, not the whole 2 hours, like the mid 45 minutes of slow pacing, then you're in for a treat. So I'll give Quintet a 7.5 out of 10. Could have definitely been better, but still enjoyable, partly or mainly because of its smart and ahead of its time idea. So hope you enjoyed this review, and yalla bye until next time.